Hello, everybody. It looks like we're live again. Of course, we're going to wait for everyone to join, as per usual. How's everyone going on their Sunday morning, Saturday night? I'm not quite sure with the time zones, but I'm really grateful to be here again. Thank you so much again for all of your support. It's really exciting for me to be back and share more of my experiences with as many of you as possible. So thank you. Thank you again for making this happen. Um, yeah, I think I will probably wait for more people to come on. Oh, hey, Oscar and Ayush, how's it going? Nice to see you guys. Thank you for joining again. So last week I tried to go through a bit too much content. So what I'm going to do is try to really narrow it down to just probably just one thing for today, and then we'll make sure that we cover a ton of Q&A as well. Oscar, I'm going well. Not much is new in the land of Danny at the moment. Just trying to continue improving on these lives and see how it keeps going. Oh, awesome. We've got more people. Hello. Hello, Ayush. Hello, Madhu. Nice to see you guys. Awesome. Really great. Okay, so we'll do another 30 seconds or so, and then we'll get started for this week's live. Awesome. I'm loving the excitement and the energy. It's really, really good. It makes me so pumped and motivated every single time. Okay. All right, let's get started. So thank you again. Thank you so much for joining me on a Sunday and investing some of your weekend with me. Today, we're going to have episode 3 of Data with Danny, more personalized mentoring, and let's see how it goes. All right. So for today, what I want to cover is mostly going to be on my iPad again. And what I'm going to do first is cover what we've been doing and what I've been doing behind the scenes for the personalized mentorship component of what we're doing. I know a few of you have been asking, where is the personalized mentorship? And I want to talk through more around what I'm doing through there and seeing how I can help as many people as possible. Then after that, what I'm going to do is cover what is data science, and I wanted to cover more around what are the common learning pathways which people experience, and kind of map it out to different groups of some of my mentees and the different situations that you're in, to try and give you a bit more guidance on how you can make it through your journey. And of course, after all of that, we're going to do a lot of Q&A. So thank you so much, and let's get started. All right. So today, more about the mentorship, more common learning pathways, and then the Q&A. Let's get rolling. So what have we been doing this week for the personalized mentorship? I'm very excited to announce that we've opened up the Slack community. So I've been sending out links to people who've responded to my survey, and also some people who've interacted with me on LinkedIn. It's really awesome. Some of my friends have joined as well, and they're really enjoying how friendly and just how helpful some of the people in the community are. So I'm really excited for that, and I really, really want to make it awesome for everyone. I've created lots of different channels in there, so I'm not sure for the people who've already joined. I noticed that there weren't too many people in some of the related channels in terms of, let's say, R or Python, some GitHub channels. So if you're on the Slack, or if you haven't joined already, please join some of those channels, because that's where we're going to do a lot of interacting and just really help each other out. What I've also been doing is some of the guys have been contacting me directly and asking for some help with some of their GitHub review, or reviewing some of their projects in terms of, let's say, an end-to-end IPython notebook or anything like that. Ayush, I will definitely send you the link. Probably I'll do it after this session, just in case I get lost here. So yeah, I've been helping out a few individuals with their specific projects. It's actually been really interesting because I get to see some of your work and also provide direct feedback, which I know if I was in your position, it would be very, 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 very helpful for me. So I'm hoping that once I go through this with a few more people, I'd really love if they can share their own experiences and what they've learned through some of the feedback directly in the Slack, if possible. And then we can kind of get this ongoing cycle of giving back and helping each other, because I think that's what we're really after here. Um, yeah, so I'm still very open to anyone who wants to share me their GitHub or any project that they've currently got running. I'm more than happy to provide some feedback and some guidance and anything that you can do to improve it. So please send them my way. I'm very happy to help. Okay, so the next component is I've also, if you haven't been on LinkedIn recently, I've been sharing almost daily, I've been sharing some links for some free learning resources. So I started this because there's this website that I always visit in Australia where they just kind of crowdsource a lot of bargains or like online deals. And some of them are always related to free online courses. So I thought to myself, oh, why not just start sharing these things so then more people can get access to really good material for free? So I've just started doing that, and I've got some really good feedback on the LinkedIn, and I've also started sharing it on the Slack as well. So I hope that for anyone who's struggling to find some of the courses or trying to toss up between different courses where you have to pay for something, please do check out these free resources. I can't personally vouch for everything, because I haven't taken them, but I really hope that because it's free, it's worth a shot just to go through it and see what's up. All right. Now, today I'm going to go through a guided learning path. So that's what we're going to talk about for the rest of this session. Hopefully, what I'll do is try and provide a bit more clarity on exactly what I think is data science, through my own experiences and what I've seen in the industry. It might clash with some people's and it might be a little bit controversial, but I hope you guys hang in there with me as I go through and flesh out some of my thoughts for that. I really hope that that will help you, at least give you some clarity at the beginning of your journey, because I found for myself, I had no idea what I was doing right at the beginning, and I really wish someone like me had helped me when I was starting off. So I really hope that I can do that for you guys. And the last thing that I want to do is probably in the future, I'm starting to get a better idea of what sort of live programming and shared projects that we can work on together. In the Slack on one of the channels, someone has actually shared me a data set and asked me, "Oh, Danny, we should take a look at this data set and see what sort of questions we can answer with it." So I responded back with just a handful of different questions that people can kind of use whatever language that they want and whatever tool, Excel, Python, R, whatever, just to try and read the data in and do whatever you can with it. I think that's a really good place to start. But over time, what I want is kind of to try and build out a structured project to try and nail out every single piece of the puzzle that the hiring managers are looking for, or what are the gaps that you guys need to take you to the next level of your career. So I'm really hoping to focus more on that stuff. Okay, so that's enough for what's going on in the world of personalized mentorship. Thank you again so much for all your support, and I will definitely send out that Slack link to everyone again, just in case. So yeah, just watch this space. Okay, now on to today for the guided learning path. I'm sure nearly everyone has seen this data science or data Venn diagram. For me, actually, as I was preparing for today, I stumbled across another, like a very similar diagram, and it kind of triggered my thoughts to think, oh, we should really try and clear up just exactly what all these roles are, and also what they mean and how they fit in the ecosystem of all the data stuff that's going on. Um, for me, the main things to know is usually what we see is people think of data science as three main areas. So we have software, maths and statistics, as well as business. I think for me personally, people try and think of the data science as the intersection of all three, which is very true, but I think it's not the be all and end all of everything. The way I like to think of it is more around the different types of roles around each area. So for example, let's say we're in software only. So you can think of, say, traditional developers. We've got web developers, back end, front end, all those types of development heavy roles in there. Now, if we think of maths and stats, you can think of the pure statistician or the researchers who look into all the data for their areas. And for business, usually what we see sometimes is people sometimes put this as subject matter expertise, which I think is fine. For me, it makes it clearer if we really delineate between the business role in terms of, here I've put down either a product owner or certain business managers, just to try and clear out and delineate between the different areas. So once we have those three separate distinct fields, now we can start looking at the overlaps. So here I've put in, let's start with the software and the maths and stats. So I think for me, the easiest way to describe it would be, imagine your machine learning engineer, someone who is very good with the software and also very good at the machine learning. So then they can try and deploy the machine learning in production systems. So we like to try and separate out that as the ML engineer. Now, if we move down towards here, from there down to the software and the business component, where there's a bit of intersection, this was a little bit tricky because sometimes people put in just the traditional developers into this intersection area. But what I've done is thought of it more in terms of what's the intersection between software and business. Most of the time it's what data does the business have. So here I've kind of put in data engineer as another area of focus, just to try and split it out and give you guys a bit more clarity on where everything sits. So now that we've gone through the two engineering roles, now we can go to something which is a bit closer to our understanding, which is the data analyst. The person who kind of sits with the business and also has a good understanding of the maths and the stats to actually drive some sort of business value through insights, dashboarding, and just trying to answer business questions. This is what a data analyst generally does. And now that we've covered all three of those intersections, we can finally think about this middle section, where here I've kind of put in data science in a question mark, because these days I think data science, people try and refer to it in a whole lot of different ways now. So it used to be this, where it's just the intersection of the math, stats, and business. But now you kind of get all these different definitions that range from someone who is more like an analyst through to the real extent of someone who deploys everything into production. And then you also get it on the other end where they're just more like a business consultant. So clearly, or maybe not clearly, but there seems to be some sort of a definition problem here. And what I wanted to do was try and clear that up a little bit in terms of my knowledge and my understanding. Okay. So the way I like to think about it is almost in terms of a high, medium, low on the y-axis, as well as those three core things on the bottom. So you see that there's software, business, and maths and stats on the bottom, as well as those high, medium, low. And I don't know if this is the right data visualization to choose with this, honestly, but it kind of made more sense in my head. Let's start with the data engineer. So the data engineer, you start off with, they need high software skills, which is very understandable because they have to deploy a lot of things into production. I've put here that in the business area, they only need a medium level of business knowledge. I think most of the time when you're trying to automate a lot of data pipelines, it's really good to understand what the business wants, just so you can kind of build the right thing. And here you can see that the maths and stats is low for the data engineer. Traditionally, this is what I've seen when I've worked with a few data engineers, but it can always change. If we think of the machine learning engineer, here they also have this high level of of software skills because they deal with production systems. The business skills are still in the middle because you want all those engineering processes to kind of work with the business. And here they've got this high maths and stats because if you're going to be optimizing different algorithms, you should know your maths pretty well. Now let's go on to the data scientist. So here, I think this is, from my experience, most of the data scientists that I've worked with, usually they'll have medium level of software skills. So they're usually quite proficient in using the version control, bit of R and Python, maybe a lot of SQL. In terms of the business, they should always be high on the business side. You really need to understand what problems you're trying to solve. I think if you have really good technology skills, but you don't know how to solve the problem or don't know how to frame up the problem, you'll miss the mark, regardless of how talented you are. So I can't stress that enough in terms of having the business understanding. And here, the maths and stats, I've kind of put it just in the medium level. Of course, you have really great data scientists who come from a PhD and research background where their maths and stats are extremely high. But I think the majority of people working in the data science environment at the moment, you don't actually need that much maths and stats. I found more often than not, you just need enough to be able to understand some of the underlying components, as well as some of the, let's say you're trying to implement some research paper. You should be able to read through the paper and kind of comprehend what's going on, but you might not necessarily have to go in full deep to actually prove some of the theorems, for example. Okay, and the last thing would be to cover off this data analyst. So the data analyst is the humble role in all of these, in the data science and the data world, really. But actually, the data analyst will have usually the most impact out of everyone. Here, you can see that the software skill requirements are not so high for the data analysts, but you can see that their business skills must be super high. I would actually put them above the levels of a data scientist. Sometimes when we work in projects where, let's say I'm working as a data scientist and I'd have to work with the business to try and understand their problem, usually there'll be a translator type who is always a data analyst who just knows the data much better than any of the scientists and the business, and they kind of drive the solution for what the data scientists try and build. So it's very important. Especially you need to have really good analytic skills to really make a huge impact as a data analyst. And here I've kind of put, where have I gone? Here I've put their maths and stats at a medium, but really it could also come down to a low area. I think the major part for any data analyst is to try and frame up any analysis, so then you can make really solid conclusions with any of your data insights. And a little bit of statistical knowledge goes a really long way when you're doing that sort of work. Okay, so I hope that kind of explains between the different roles. I'm not sure if this diagram is the best way to do it, but I hope that it makes sense to some of you. Now, what I wanted to talk about was the different types of data scientists. So I don't know how popular this is anymore, but when I was starting off and moving into data science, there was a real focus on these first two roles, this A and B type data science. So the A stands for analyst, and you can think of it as like an extension of a data analyst, but with more automation, more experimentation, more of the science put into it. So think of it, I always thought of this type A as like some sort of extreme analyst where they are just really good with the analytics and they just blitz everyone. But then they kind of pick up more and more skills. Maybe they do some machine learning, a little bit of things to do some exploration. Maybe they look at some clustering, things like that, where you can kind of really scale up the sort of analytics that you're doing. This is what the type A data science person is looking at. Now, if we move on to this type B, B stands for builder. In this case, usually they're the ones who are building the automated machine learning frameworks. Maybe they look into packaging up some of the analysis and the models into full-blown Python or R packages, so then they can share it across the rest of the team. Sometimes, or not sometimes, nearly all of the times, they come from a strong software experience background. So these guys will be very good with the Git. They'll be very, very good at R or Python, maybe both. And these guys are they're the guys that you go after when you need to automate something fully, really get it into production. And the last type, I thought about it, and this came to me only recently. But nowadays, there's also a third type of data scientist, which is, I'm going to call it the consultant data science person. But think of them as they're more business focused, very, very business focused, to the point where they'll start managing projects. They start to figure out how to integrate some of the machine learning solutions into upstream and downstream systems. So, for example, let's say you build a really, really good model, but you need to somehow get that model into the system so then it can actually recommend something to some customer on the app that they're using for Audible, for example. So you kind of need those types of, it's almost like a really, really solid BA, a business analyst, where they have a really good understanding of all the systems, all the different stakeholders and the different parties that have a stake in whether this project works or not. And then they just kind of work with all of them to try and figure out what's the best way ahead. And what we see is usually these C types, usually we see them in management. So they are more consider like your chief data scientist, or maybe the lead data scientist who is more on a business side that has to try and win business. And they also have a really large sales function. Most of the data science teams that we see in larger organizations, they kind of work like a mini consulting team, where you usually have someone who's out there trying to win projects or win some funding from different business stakeholders. And they kind of need to give them some business estimates on how the project is going to go, what sort of returns they're looking to get, and then also try and manage the project so they can deliver it successfully. So it's quite a challenging role, but in my mind, those are the three different types of data science. The A and the B are very well established, and I think a lot of people have written about it. The C is something I kind of just made up on my own based off my experiences, so I'm not sure if it's true, but I think it's an interesting way to look at things. So I've also put the A, B, and C onto the Venn diagram just to give you a flavor of where I think the different areas kind of overlap. So you can see now that the builder, or let's start with the analyst type. So the analyst type is on this side. And you can see that there's more intersection between the statistics and the business side as opposed to the software engineering side. So there's a lot more focus on what are the insights, what actions are they driving, how do we know that it's right? All of these sorts of questions are what they answer. Now, if we look at the B side, so the builder side, you can see that they're very much in the software area, where they're expected to be pretty much full-on software engineers, where they can kind of look into different APIs, put things into production, and run like a full software control cycle sort of approach for any of their projects. And if we look at the C is coming in directly from the business, so you can imagine what sort of focus that they have. And the last question here that I've got is, what is a unicorn in terms of a unicorn data scientist? So a few different people have weighed in on this, but my view is just someone who's just maxed out their stats in every single component of this analyst, builder, and consultant. I think you can only really get to that stage through a lot of experience and time doing each of those things. Personally, for me, I don't consider myself a unicorn at all. I pretty much started off as a data analyst, and then I kind of moved through the different stages or the ABCs of data science. And at the moment, I'd say I'm more of in the builder type area. So I think it's pretty interesting to try and find out where people have built up their career in data science and try and figure out what type of data scientist they are. Okay. So going on from the ABCs, I wanted to go through the different learning paths and kind of flesh this out a little bit. So what I really wanted to do was more focus, instead of just giving you the information of, oh, you need to do XYZ to end up as a building type data scientist. I wanted to kind of frame it in a way where you have to try and ask yourself the question of, oh, what role do I want? And that kind of drives what sort of skill set that you need to develop first. So let's just run through this one. So let's say that I'm going to answer, what role do I want? And I'm going to go down the left-hand side. I'm going to go for a data analyst role. So what are the most important things for a data analyst role? You need business knowledge. You need to be very good with data. Here I've put Excel. I think working as a data analyst, one of the major tools that I used a lot was Excel. We did it a lot for charting, a lot for summaries and different things as well. I think it's always a really good skill to have, especially if you need to work within the analytics function. So it's definitely worthwhile investing some time if you want to be a data analyst. Here I've put SQL. You guys will love, well, you guys probably remember my love for the SQL. I really think that it's super important, not just for data analyst type roles, but for every single role. So I highly recommend you guys put in more effort into the SQL. For the data analyst role, you'll also be doing a lot of presentation and you'll be doing a lot of communication as well. So that's another thing that you need to focus on. And the last thing that I put down for the data analyst types were for the data visualization. So here I've just got 3 tools, but that can kind of be etc. And kind of the way I like to approach the tooling for data visualization is if you know what your target company or the target role, if you know what they're using, learn the thing that they're using. At the moment, what we're seeing is Tableau is very, very popular. If you understand and can be very proficient at Tableau and you can demonstrate it, it might open you up for more roles in the data analytics space. So it's definitely something worthwhile to look into. We also see people starting to use MicroStrategy and Alteryx as other options as well. But these are kind of, there are tons and tons of tools. They come and go. It's just you need to kind of keep a finger on the pulse to see exactly what people are looking for. The best way to do that is probably to just continue browsing on LinkedIn. I think you hear a lot of interesting things coming from some of the top voices from there across the data, machine learning, and the data science space. So I think it's just worthwhile just to keep aware of what's going on in the industry in terms of tooling. Okay, so that's the data analyst side. Now let's go on to here. I've kind of put the engineering is out of scope for now. I see a question here actually. Here, where can I learn software engineering after my data science courses? I think I will definitely talk more about this because I'm quite passionate about the software engineering in my current stage of where I'm at in my career. So definitely in the future, we'll talk about that a bit more. For this session, what I'm going to do is just keep it out of scope so I don't run out of time like last week. Okay, so going on to what role do I want? I want a data science role. And the next question you ask is, what type of data science role do I want? And sometimes it's difficult to answer that question. I think it comes with experience to try and understand your own preferences, and that takes a lot more self-awareness. So I think at the moment it doesn't matter so much what type of role, but you can kind of get a feel for it. So if you like digging more into business problems and you want to use some of the machine learning, maybe the analyst type is better suited for you. But if you really love building systems and making sure the things are automated and you love the computer engineering side of it, then definitely the builder is more towards your stream, if not the engineering side as well. And the consultant, I think what we see is usually people come through the ranks. So maybe you spend some time as a data analyst, some time as an analyst data science role, and then you become a builder. And then you start having the full understanding of what's going on, and then you can try and manage more projects. So sometimes I think of it as like a sequential sort of path, but I'll go into that a bit more later. So let's say that you want to be an analyst type data science. So this is just going to be my view very quickly of what sort of skills that you need to focus on. I see a comment here about the Power BI. Yeah, I think Power BI is also being used quite a lot as well. I might have mixed it up with a MicroStrategy, so sorry about that. But Power BI is very useful for data analysts. Now going back to the analyst area here. So I put here what these are the things that I focused on when I was in a type A data science role. So my main focus was asking the right questions. That was nearly it was it was the most important thing for me, because usually when you work on business projects, there's no real guidance given to you. There's a very open-ended question, and your role as a data scientist is kind of to formulate the different questions that you could ask the data, and then you test your different hypotheses by running some analyses, and then you try and go back to the business with some recommendations or different models that you could build or different things like that. So I thought that was one of the main things. Here I've put down R or Python. I think if you're more focused on trying to ask the data what some questions about the data and trying to find some insights, personally, I found R more intuitive to learn. The language was made by statisticians for statisticians to begin with. So I think it's the data analysis toolkit is very mature. I think Python has also matured up in the past few years as well. So I definitely don't want to discount anyone learning Python as well. But I think R is very good for the analysis type. And it kind of links in very well with the data visualization and the statistics at the end of this analyst type role as well. I think those two things they were the main focus for my roles, where you're expected to show a lot of information from all the analysis that you have. And it ends up being almost like a visual design problem to try and build up a dashboard where you can kind of show all of the information to the right audience. So let's say it was management level people and they have to understand quite simple metrics, and you can't throw a ton of different complex charts at them. So I learned a lot through that in terms of trying to simplify the message that I was trying to give. And the statistics side is just to help you with the experimentation and the experimentation design aspect of what you're going to do with your insights as well. So here I've got a question in terms of, is it okay to do the two roles together? I'm going to assume this is the analyst and the building type role. Please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. I really think you can do it. The only issue I see with it is there's a lot of stuff to learn. It's one of the major things that we think about when we start working in the industry, especially in data science, is you do a ton of learning on the job. I know that it's difficult to break into the field, but having a real focus on the area that you want to break into really helps with the targeting of how you're going to break in. So if let's say you have a strong software engineering background, maybe it would be perfect to go down the building track, where you learn more about the language components of, let's say, Python. I'm just going to go through this list here since we're on it. I think for the building type, you really want to have really strong software engineering skills. I talk here about all the math and the algorithms. So think of the different transformations that you need for deep learning and all the different boosted trees and all those things. You should be well across over, even as an entry-level building type data science enthusiast. So I think that's why builder types are quite rare coming out of uni or coming in as an entry role. Usually what we see is people just go this way. They start off as an analyst type to try and build up their skill set and understanding of the data. And then they go on to start automating some of their processes. And along that journey, they pick up a lot more software engineering skills. So here you can see I've also put the software on this component. And in terms of software in that, I think of it more in terms of unit testing, integration testing, trying to make sure that everything works seamlessly. And if something fails, how will you manage it? So it's much more of an engineering discipline to make sure that everything runs smoothly. And I've also put down Docker here. Docker is sort of like a virtual machine technology that we use extensively throughout the machine learning and for the production systems. I think it's almost critical that any building type data science enthusiast really needs to understand Docker. But I've put it down the list because you should understand these three before you try and tackle more difficult problems with the Docker. Sometimes what I've seen is also people use the Docker to bundle up all of their environments and packages, and then they start learning with the Python as well. To that, I say if you're comfortable with Docker, coming from a software engineering background, that's totally fine. I just think it's very difficult for people without that background to kind of jump straight in and understand what they're doing without wasting a lot of time. That was my experience personally. So I think it's much better just to go kind of top down, just to try and keep the learning path very clear. Let's see. Oh, I'm just seeing a question here. So Ayush is asking, why can't we use Tableau for data analysis instead of R? I really think that you can use Tableau for data analysis. I think what I'm talking about in this area is more what's the status quo set of tools for the analyst type data science role. So usually knowing Python and knowing R, they're quite like the mainstay tools for data science at the moment. Tableau is more of, we usually think of it as a data analyst tool, not so much for the data science. I know a lot of people will say, oh, I'm a data scientist and I use Tableau, but what we're seeing is they're usually more on the rarer side because most of the data scientists, or at least the ones that I've worked with, they usually don't want to use Tableau. They only want to use R or Python. So it's sort of, it depends sort of thing, which is, I know it's not the right thing to hear, but it is what it is sometimes. I think, oh, there's one question here in terms of infrastructure. So I'm just going to pull this up a little bit higher so people can see it. So yeah, I think personally in my mind, I think of infrastructure as part of the software component. After working for the last 2 years or so on a very more of an engineering component, a lot of the tools that we use and the different APIs and knowledge that we need is actually all about infrastructure and how they play together, as well as moving the data from place to place. So I think it's a very good point in terms of having the infrastructure in there. Maybe in the future, I'll change that slide to add in that infrastructure point as well. Iman wants to hear more about the machine learning engineer role. I think if I have time at the end of the session, I'll go through more of it. But in a nutshell, the way I think of machine learning engineer is it's almost this builder type. So this builder type in the past was before the machine learning engineer role was really popularized. These days, you see there's a lot of things about ML ops and AI ops and all these different things where the machine learning engineers kind of specialize in. I think for all intensive purposes, you can think of this builder type. It's almost the same as that machine learning engineer, but with maybe less of a focus on infrastructure. So maybe there's less focus on cloud computing or the DevOps and running things in parallel and different things like that. I think that's more of the engineer's role where you're trying to squeeze out all the juice out of the system to make it run as smoothly as possible. But that's just how I try and simplify things for my own role as well. Okay. I'll just talk quickly about the consultant, but essentially the consultant role is you manage projects. Essentially, you try and manage the project not only from a delivery point of view, but also from engaging with stakeholders, making sure the business understands exactly what the data science team is doing, and trying to manage expectations a lot. So there's a very large focus on communication, estimates, value, and all of these sorts of things are very, very important for the consultant type, but they only come with experience. You almost have to do a ton of different projects to really understand what are those different components. So I don't think it's realistic for people coming in to think, oh, I want to be a consultant type data science in my entry role. Chances are you won't get that level of, let's say, trust from your team purely because you need that in-depth experience to actually make decisions at that level. Um, let's see. Before I talk about what my journey was, I might answer this question as well. So, if someone is interested in only a builder type, is it easy for a fresher to get into a builder role without getting into an analyst field? This is a really good question. I would say it's definitely possible, but you would need a very high level of software engineering skills. Um, it's very These days it's very rare to see entry level machine learning engineer or building type data science roles. Usually, if they do appear, they'll usually take the cream of the crop out of, say, a software engineering discipline or a computer science cohort of graduates. Sometimes with a mathematics or an engineering as well, say electrical engineering. I know quite a few data scientists who are really good, and they came from an electrical engineering background as well. So I think I wouldn't discount anything, but I found personally for me, without having a software engineering background, it was difficult for me to even understand what was going on in the building. So um, yeah, with that, I'm going to segue into what was my journey. So I talked about it briefly in one of the lives where I talked about when I started off as a graduate in a data analytics role. So that was me in this space. I kind of learnt all of these things throughout my journey. I spent about 2 years really focusing in on that. I had a larger focus on campaigns, so lots of marketing campaigns and uplift measurement and different things like that. So I had more of, let's say my stats were a bit higher than the normal analyst. And from there, I kind of moved across directly into this data science analyst role, where I was starting to use some of the machine learning, but I wasn't expected to automate a lot of things. It was kind of just hack as you go and try and figure things out and see what works, sort of thing. And it really depends on what sort of business that you join, more over what specific business unit and what focus they have. So for me, it was quite a new area. So they didn't have a lot of established data science projects. So it was kind of a very cool greenfield area. So I was very, very lucky. And then after I started building more models, I then ventured into being this building type data scientist where I had to think about, okay, I've got my models. How do I productionize them? And it was kind of the time when I had to learn about unit testing, learn about Docker, learn about the different automations, and try and get it all to work in harmony. That was a really good experience for me. Before I had that experience, I really thought that I was going to stay as this analyst type and then end up eventually making it over to this consultant type, leading projects, because at the time, all the lead data scientists or the senior data scientists were doing mostly that stuff. They were managing their projects and making sure everything was delivered. But for me, when I started doing the building type, it was really interesting, and I kind of fell in love with it. And then I kind of eventually I moved out of that existing role. I moved over into more of an engineering function, and that's where I am at the moment. So I think everyone's journey is very different. I think being able to share my journey with you guys to try and give you an idea of what I went through and some of the thinking. I hope that helps in terms of trying to clarify up where you guys want to go also. Um, yeah, I'm going to move on to the next slide. And now I'm going to talk about some example learning paths. Um, I kind of, I'm not sure if I have all of this fleshed out, but I kind of just have these 6 different types here. Um, at the moment, what I'm going to think of is these two. So let's say students and career switches. Um, Firstly, if you're in those positions, the first question to ask yourself is, um, you can kind of say, do you come from a technical background or do you come from a business background? So the technical background will be statistics, machine learning research, maybe operations research, software engineering, whilst business could be more, if you're a career switcher, Are you managing teams in your current function within the business? Are you a business analyst? Maybe you've been running some campaigns or doing some different things like that. I think that gives you the first place to start off in terms of what you should learn. Because if you come from a technical background, chances are your technical skills with the programming and the data and the software, it'll come easier for you as opposed to someone who hasn't had that exposure. So usually what I say is for the people with the technical background, try to focus more on the application side of things, where you want to demonstrate your knowledge of the process and really flesh out that not only are you technically proficient, but also you understand where everything fits in. When you're coming from a business side and you don't have many technical skills that are required, I usually recommend people to go fully deep into learning those technical skills. Those are the things that the hiring managers will challenge you on when you apply for a role with a lot of experience coming from business. Or if you're say you're coming out of business school without a technical major. Those are the things that you need to kind of strike off in terms of those are the doubts that the hiring managers will have. So you need to do whatever you can to kind of nip it in the bud and stop it there so then you can progress to the next stage. So here with the data analyst to the data scientist, I think it's pretty clear. You just need to upskill on the gaps of the knowledge. Hopefully some of the slides before shed a bit more light on what sort of things that we need to know in a data science function. I think I'll cover an example of one of those learning paths as well in a future slide. Here, in terms of the fourth one, is engineer to data scientist. So here, let's think of engineer as you can either be a software engineer or a data engineer. Usually machine learning engineers should understand the data science very well. So I'm going to exclude those guys. So this would just be kind of software or data. So in my recent work, I've actually worked with a lot of these types to try and upskill them on the knowledge required for data science. I really enjoy working with these guys because most of the time they're super smart. Being able to write software really well is actually, I think it's quite difficult. I really appreciate their skills. And the main thing to focus on if you come from a software or a data engineering background is to focus on the business and the stats side of things. So the business is clear. You just have to try and find the people who understand the business really well and learn from them. The statistics is a bit more difficult to grasp because most of it is, I think of statistics like a threshold concept. It's once you understand the concept, you can't think of it in another way. But if you don't know what you don't know at the same time. So you kind of need to, the key for any of the engineers trying to move over into a data science function is you need to network. You need people who can teach you directly or coach you or mentor online to kind of give you that broader vision of how the machine learning and the data science kind of works with the technology. The good thing is because you guys come from a software background, a lot of the coding will be very easy to pick up. So you guys just need to build up that conceptual awareness of the data science and you can definitely make it through. I've seen a lot of really good data scientists have come from a software engineering background and they are amazing. Okay. So the fifth one, accidentally rubbed out something. The fifth one is data scientist to engineer. This is along some of my learning path. So what I did was I had to really upskill in my software skills. That means being all across the GitHub, learning multiple languages, learning unit testing, deployment, all those different things that live within a generic software development cycle. You need to really learn all of that. I think that was the most important part. And I think these days, engineering mostly happens it happens on premise, so on physical machines that live within someone's company, or they usually happen nowadays in the cloud, and it's only going to increase. So I would also say cloud computing is very important if you want to move across to engineering as a data scientist. And the last one, I personally need more help with this one myself. So how do you move from a data scientist to more of a leadership role? I think the clear focus is probably you need to do more consulting and manage larger projects. And as you do larger and larger projects, the business will kind of give you more trust and ownership of more people in your team, and you grow that team. Or maybe you have different problem areas that you're trying to solve and the business trusts you, so they give you more leeway to operate in that area. So personally, number six is where I'm a bit weak in and I need to develop myself more. So one of the easiest, or I wouldn't say the easiest way, but one of the ways to do that is to network with people who are in the leadership positions and ask them for some advice. I think it might seem daunting because most of these people are really senior, but in the end, we're all just people. And I think if you really reach out to people and are genuine in terms of what sort of support you need from them, um, maybe they'll be able to help you. I think the best you can do as an individual is just kind of put yourself out there and make those opportunities happen. And sometimes you get it right, sometimes you don't. I think that's what's exciting about all this stuff in general, I think. All right. Um, I'm going to go through one example of, let's say that I am a beginner. So I've just finished, maybe I'm a graduate, and I wanted to get into an entry level data science or machine learning role. So I'm going to run through kind of the learning path that I would take now, given my knowledge and my past experiences, just to give you a feel for what you might want to focus on if you're in this current position. So here you might notice that I've put GitHub and highlighted it. To reiterate again, GitHub is very, very, very important. We do a lot of software development in our daily roles, and one very easy way to stand out as an entry level hire would be to have very good Git skills, so version control skills. And also, if you have your own website that's run from your GitHub, that's very, very impressive. So, yeah, this is very good. It's money. So then let's say I've set up my GitHub and I try and learn how to make all my commits and do different branches and all this different stuff with base level software development skills. Then I want to start learning about maybe one of R or Python, depending on what sort of role you want to get into, either the analyst role or the building type role, and definitely focus on the SQL as well. You'll see that a lot of the data that we work with lives in SQL databases. So it's very, very important to be very good at SQL. The best way to learn these two things, there are many, many ways. There's lots of free courses, books, online courses. You can learn from the documentation directly. Some of the authors of the languages also have different books that are online for free. I think in the future I'll try and share more resources on these ones, but I don't want to pin down you must learn Python this way because I did it. So I want to make sure that point is very well understood. But yeah, I think these things you need as an entry level data science or machine learning practitioner. The other things that you need is also basic maths and basic stats. I know this is probably the most confronting component because people who don't come from a maths and stats background will find it very difficult to understand some of this. What I want to reiterate and highlight is, for me, the only amount of math knowledge that I needed was just enough to understand and read technical papers. So for the majority of it is just basic calculus and matrix algebra. That's pretty much all I remembered from my uni degree, and I use them maybe once a month or week, maybe depending if I'm working on a more technical project or not. But yeah, it's really good to have those skills so you can actually read through the paper and kind of understand it at a high level, conceptual level. And then if you need to dive in deeper, there's always Google and textbooks and things that you can look into. So don't be too intimidated by the amount of math knowledge that you need. For the statistics, I just shared here that probability distributions and hypothesis testing, they're pretty much the main two things that I've had to use throughout my career of, let's say, 5 years or so in a data role. I haven't had to use too much more. There is a whole different field of, let's call it Bayesian statistics, which is very cool and new within the machine learning space. I think to move into that space, you need a much better understanding of statistics. But pretty much you just need enough statistics knowledge to be able to design experiments and validate some of the insights that you generate. I think having the hypothesis testing, that knowledge is very important for that insight validation. And having the probability distributions gets you to think more in terms of, I think the probability distributions are very useful for machine learning specifically. You can try and think of it in, it's hard to describe for me right now, so I'll try and put more thought into it before I give you a more overall summary, but just know that probability distributions are really important. And here for the applied component, I think of these as, okay, now that you know the base knowledge, what can you demonstrate with your knowledge to apply that to demonstrate that you can use that in a real situation. And the best way to do that is to show your knowledge of common packages in the languages that you've learned. For example, in Python, you might want to know about pandas, and for the machine learning, maybe you want scikit-learn, for example. Maybe you want to do some deep learning stuff as well. And the most important thing is probably this end-to-end machine learning project if you really want to stand out. Of course, you try and integrate it directly with your GitHub so you can have even more bonus points. But this end-to-end machine learning project will it'll show the hiring managers that you understand where different components of the data science process fits in. And more often than not, that knowledge is more important than being able to dive into a certain algorithm, for example. But I think, having an example of an end-to-end machine learning project is very, very important. It would be even better if you can somehow incorporate some SQL into it, as well as the Python or the R. And even bonus points if you can also finalize whatever your machine learning thing is with some sort of dashboard or some sort of automated visualizations that you can kind of just show it in a single report. Now, so those are sort of the things that we like to see in entry-level data science. I think it might seem very intimidating because there's a lot of stuff on there, but you don't learn these things overnight. It takes time. The first thing is probably knowing what you want to learn. So I hope this kind of gives you a better picture of what we're after. Here I've put down some bonuses. So I'll just list them here without going into too much depth. But there's Docker, dashboarding. If you can write a blog or a tutorial linked in with your GitHub, that will demonstrate that you are a good communicator through written communication, which is very, very important as well. Let's see, deep learning. So I think of it as a bonus because a lot of the problems that we solve in machine learning, especially at an entry level, we don't necessarily default to deep learning straight away. I think it's much more important to understand, let's say, the decision tree, logistic regression, boosted trees, all those traditional machine learning algorithms. Having a really good understanding of them and how they play in the ecosystem and what they do, and a conceptual level of what's going on under the hood, it's much more important than actually having a lot of deep learning experience. But I think over time that might change as well, so just watch this space. I think the deep learning is becoming more and more popular, so over time I think that might eventually end up as one of the applied things. But it's more just a hunch rather than anything. And cloud computing is just a bonus, especially if you know that the target company that you're going for uses the cloud. It would be very ideal to, if you know which cloud they're using, if you can go do a Coursera course or some free course that kind of demonstrates your knowledge of what's going on in that environment, it'll definitely be a big bonus. What I'd caveat that with is that I think most of the cloud providers they're quite similar. So if, let's say, you only want to spend your time using GCP, for example, Google Cloud Platform, versus learning Amazon AWS, just choose one of the two and just stick with it. I think it's better to have deep or good knowledge in one of them because a lot of the concepts are the same. If you try and level up at the same time, you might confuse yourself. So just try and stick with one. Hopefully that's the one that your target company wants to use because that will look really, really good. Okay, I am over the 1 hour mark. Awesome. I'm just going to go through one last learning path example. And this is for a beginner going into a data analyst role. So here again, I've put in the GitHub. Honestly, GitHub is not required for data analytics, but what I think it's really, really impressive if you have a GitHub and you're going for a data analytics role. It kind of speaks volumes about where you want to go in terms of, I want to start as a data analyst and then eventually make my way into more of a software focused machine learning engineering role. And having that sort of vision really is really cool. I think when I started off as a data analyst, that was in my second role, when I started in a more of an analytics function before moving into a data science role. When I interviewed and I shared that, I really wanted to move and do more machine learning and data science, that I think my hiring managers really liked it, that I wanted to continue growing. So that's just something to keep in mind with the GitHub here. Here I've put in, you want to know at least up to intermediate level Excel. I kind of wrote that down without thinking through exactly what is intermediate Excel, but you'd be able to do at least a lot of charting. You might be able to process different data sets. Maybe you can try and automate some of the summaries and different things. Some people might call it basic Excel, but it's anything that you can do in Excel where you're trying to answer questions is good enough in my book. And here I've also put SQL. There are tons and tons of resources where you can learn SQL. I think if you're going for a data analyst role and you don't have SQL, you'll find it very difficult to find a place that will give you the chance without the SQL. So please try and learn it. I think it's not too difficult as well. And it's a good foundation to have really strong SQL for any of the other data science and machine learning related skill set as well. So very, very important. Those are the only two baseline things that you need from a technical component. And then if we start thinking about the applied knowledge, here I'm just going to run through these quickly, but I've got demonstrate industry knowledge and research. Sometimes, let's say you're going for a role with social media company. It would be good to know when you're in your interview to kind of demonstrate that you understand these are the social networks that I use, for example. Here is what I think are their purposes, and here are some of the data sources that could exist in there. Just something like that to demonstrate that you want that role in that industry is very important. Here I've put down a exploratory analysis example. So in the same way that I was saying with the intermediate Excel and the SQL, you should be able to take a data set, ask it different questions, write your code or do your Excel to get to get the answer to the question. I think that's all that you really need to show for the exploratory analysis. Maybe you also want to do some visualization as well. So here I've also put down a dashboard example. So maybe I think as a data analyst, dashboarding is very important. You can demonstrate that not only do you understand what are the key metrics for any sort of dashboard, but you can also design the dashboard in a way that it's visually appealing, and you can simplify the data down into something which is consumable, which is very important for dashboarding. And the last one here is just a hypothetical case study. You can think of it like in the same way that last week we tried to go through the Audible sales. We want more sales. How do we get more sales? If you can try and frame up your projects in that sort of sense to try and answer a business question, I think that's very powerful because it demonstrates to the hiring managers that you understand that the insights are there to drive actions, and then the actions are the things that really make the business improve their position. So I think that's really important. Um, I'll run through the bonuses quickly. So the bonuses would be Tableau or any other data visualization tool that is popular. I think if you can demonstrate your knowledge in any of them, it's always a plus. Basic R and Python. I think if you're going for a data analyst role, you don't need to focus on them so much, but it's still quite impressive for an analyst to know some of those toolings. So if you enjoy learning new things, why not try it out and see how it goes? Just make sure to put it into your GitHub as well. I think here I've put down exposure to cloud databases. I think the cloud SQL and cloud databases and everything in the cloud is only going to increase over time. So if you have some time, you can invest some of your effort to try and learn about the different SQL things that are going on within the cloud. It will definitely be worthwhile. I think it's a good investment as well. Here I've put down A/B testing and experimentation. This is more of a bonus, and it happens more out of the type of role that you're in. So if you're in, let's say I was working in a campaign analytics role, I had to do a lot of A/B testing and different experiment setups. So I got to learn a bit more about that, but I think it's a really useful skill set to have because you can kind of frame up your logical operations in a very systematic way. So I think it's quite useful as well. So I put it as a bonus. And the last one is just the digital knowledge. So one of the reasons why I left my first job was so I can move into a role where I can learn more about the digital landscape. So as you can imagine, more and more businesses will be moving into digital. They'll have digital sales funnels and click funnels and all the social media, programmatic marketing, and all those different things. Having good knowledge of those things, or at least some peripheral awareness, let's say of SEO, for example, that can really help with your when you're going out to hiring managers as well. I think it just broadens out the different sort of roles that you can apply for. So I think having good digital knowledge is very important too. And I think I'm out of material, and my voice is starting to really run dry a little bit because I've been talking like a motor mouth for 60 something minutes. So thank you so much for sticking with me through to this time. I think let's try and do some Q&A. I might try and do a summary after a few questions as well whilst I gather my thoughts. So if you have any questions, please feel free to hit me up in the comments and I'll try my best to answer them right now. All right. Oh, sorry, I didn't scroll down far enough. Victor, thank you so much for your question. Okay, sorry, I was playing my own YouTube video, which is kind of weird. So the question is, sorry, I'll bring that up again. How do you build your GitHub page? For example, finishing a course in Python or R. I think this is a really, really good question. It's one of the things that a few different people have asked me throughout this week as well. So the way I like to think of it is almost imagine that you are, let's say the hiring manager is the person that you want to convert in a sales funnel where you are the product. So let's say you are the product that someone that you need to try and convert, and the person that you want to make the sale for is the hiring manager. So when I think of the GitHub pages, so you have like, let's say, firstly, you have your resume. In your resume, oh, sorry, didn't notice that my face was blocking that out. In the resume, you'll probably have, most people will have their name. So my name, blah, blah, blah. some statement about like their career mission, and then usually you just have your experience. So you just have experience, and then maybe your tools, and maybe something about your schooling. And usually that's it, right? So what we like to see is, let's say this is your resume, and the first thing that pops up next to your name is your github.io or your web page. When I see something like that as a hiring manager, I would just, oh yeah, I'm going to click on that. So I click directly. The sales funnel has started. Now in your sales funnel, what do you, so the aim is you want to make the sale, and the sale is you want to get hired, or at least you want to get called in for an interview. So you need to kind of think of it from that marketing perspective. Let's say I land onto your website and you're trying to sell me something. What do I want to see? So probably I'd love to see, let's say, Danny Ma, maybe a picture of my face, and then just a short bio, like one line about what I'm trying to do. Let's say ML engineer wannabe. I don't know, something like that. And then let's say the next step would be, okay, cool. They see the website, they see what's going on, and then I can start talking about some of my skills or some of the topics that I want to demonstrate, or my knowledge that I want to demonstrate to the hiring manager. So it would be really cool if you can tailor each of your pages to your specific hiring manager, but I know it's going to be difficult. So let's just say here, um, oh, I've got, let's go, 5 years experience as a data scientist. And then I would list project one. Well, I don't know if I can actually list out my projects because a lot of the source code would be going directly to a company's page. So that doesn't really work out. But I can kind of at least have a link or something that kind of describes that project in a bit more depth. Maybe you want to put in a few dot points. Project two or something. And then, but when you think of each dot point, you can kind of elaborate on it as though it's sort of like your resume. You want to demonstrate what sort of skills you have and the expertise you have. So I just think of in this way, it makes it a bit easier for the hiring manager to actually take a look at what's going on in terms of, oh, I see this project. Let's say it's not a real work project, and it's just a one of your personal end-to-end projects that you've done. Um, that hiring manager can then click directly on this link, and it takes them to your GitHub page where they can see the exact code that you're using to implement it. Um, that gives you the chance to demonstrate, oh, does your GitHub repository, does it have a nice landing page, for example? Does it have a nice README? Um, is it very well fleshed out? Is if you're doing an IPython notebook, is it well formatted? Is everything looking nice? If you're doing it in Python files, let's say .py files or something, do you have good style guides? Is your code readable? Do you have good naming convention for your code? All of these things are, personally, they're the things that I'll be looking for if someone shares with me their repository. It really gives me a great idea of their level of thinking. I think it stands out a lot if someone has all of these things down pat. I usually would just like get them in straight away and to have a chat and find out more. And that's sort of the action that you want out of someone reading through your GitHub in terms of a hiring process. Hope that helps as well. Let's see. Yep, I've got a few questions about the Slack channel. I will definitely send an email again. I'm thinking that I might just resend a reminder to everyone that replied on the survey. I hope not too many people unsubscribe from it, so we'll see how it goes. But yeah, please join the Slack. I think we can really make it a really cool thing. And I think it's really cool that everyone wants to help each other, because I think one of the best things to do is if you're learning something, if you can teach someone else, you learn it so much better. So I just want to try and provide that platform for people to actually have that opportunity to do that and give back as well. Ali, don't worry about missing the live. I think straight after, when I hit end on this one, it will upload and you can rewatch the whole thing. I'm sorry if the time didn't work for you, so maybe next time come and join me live. Let's see. Madhu, good question about Keras, PyTorch, and TensorFlow. I've actually been asked to review a book which is, I think it's Advanced Keras and TensorFlow 2. So I'm kind of looking through it and trying to get a feel for what's going on. For the deep learning, what we're seeing now, I talked about it previously. I shared a link. I might share it again in this live, but it kind of talks about some of the reasons why you might want to use PyTorch versus why you might want to use TensorFlow. So I think, yeah, hopefully that will give you a bit more idea of why some frameworks are being used versus others. In a nutshell, it comes down to the ease of productionization, or how easy it is to integrate a final model built on any of those platforms into the final production system so you can use it. And yeah, the article that I'll link it goes into quite a lot of detail. Personally, for me, I view all the deep learning things as tools to try and help solve my problem. So I'm not so much into the deep learning architecture and the different types of problems. But I think it is a very cool technology. There's all these different things I want to read more about, but I kind of wait until my projects that I'm working on really requires that sort of technology, and then I just go deep, 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 and I try and learn about that as much as possible. So I'm sorry I can't give you any more hints on that one at the moment. Okay. Oh, Ayush, I can also link the survey. It might actually be in the description below, so you can check that as well. Um, let's see. Yep, Rosalind, there will be a recording. I'll even upload the clean slides that I had on my iPad before I drew all over them and everything. So hopefully that will help too. Let's see. I'll go with this question. Is there any syllabus for how much SQL one can learn? Something that is considered competent enough for industry standards? This is a great question. I have not actually seen any real syllabus. I've seen there's a few different certificates, but I've never had to do any of them. So I'd love to hear from anyone who watches this who's actually done any of those certificates, because I want to see exactly what they cover and also what I think should be covered. What we might be doing in the Slack is I might, if I have some time, I'll try and find some interesting data sets, specifically ones that live together in the same database. So then you can kind of do different joins and different things within the data. I think that's the most important thing, just having familiarity and comfort doing different operations, such as joining, for example. So yeah, I think that I really hope that we can do something like that. So then, at least within our community, we can try and have this baseline. We should have at least this level of SQL. So that'll be really exciting. Um, Oscar, I will send you an email, but I'll probably ping you directly on an email or LinkedIn as well. It's just a sign up link. Um, I I'm actually quite open to people if they wanted to share the invite link with their friends. I'm more than happy for people to do that. At the moment, I just haven't shared it on LinkedIn in a wider sort of audience yet. I try and I think having the email as a way to contact you guys is very efficient for me, because when I post something on LinkedIn, I have no idea if I'm going to reach 50% of you because of the algorithm. So yeah, anyway, any sort of method that can help me interact with you guys better, I'm willing to take. So we'll see how it goes as well. Okay, we might do Karampal. Don't worry, I'm gonna upload this directly on YouTube straight after the live. It's all good. Let's see. I'll do probably two more questions because we've run quite over time. Let's see. Since Excel is such a vast topic, can you briefly list out the operations which data scientists and analysts should be comfortable with? So, uh, disclaimer: I haven't had to use Excel in quite a long time. I used to teach a few different knowledge sharing and courses for Excel, but it's honestly it's out of my memory. So I'd have to try and do a bit more research. I know that on LinkedIn, you can try and follow David Langer. I'll link him on this description as well. He does a really great series for teaching Excel and mapping it across to SQL commands. So I think it's really useful, and he does a really great job of teaching it. Shout out to David, he's a legend. So yeah, just feel free to follow him and just have a look at what he's got going on, and he's really helpful, really great guy. Okay, question about IBM data science. Honestly, I haven't, well, I've heard of it, but I haven't done any more research. So I can't recommend or recommend against it. I think it's maybe someone in the Slack community has taken a look at it and they've got some first-hand experience. I can always take a look at the syllabus and read through it. I might try and do that this week and give you some more inputs on that. But yeah, I think at the moment, each different cloud provider has their own data science stream that they want people to follow, mostly because it shows them how to use the different services that are provided on that cloud platform. So you can imagine for the IBM Watson one, they'd probably be using more of the Azure system or the Microsoft cloud, as opposed to using more of the GCP. I might be wrong, but I think that's, in general, that's the difference between those different courses. Okay, cool. I think I've covered most of these Q&A questions in the comments. Thank you again so much for joining me for this long extended session of Data with Danny. I had a really fun time today. I hope you guys learnt, or at least got a bit out of this session in terms of what is data science, at least to me, and some of the different Venn diagrams and some of the different roles, like the data engineer, the machine learning engineer, the data analyst, and the data scientist, the different types of data science. So there's the analyst type, the builder type, and the consultant type. I hope you guys also got a bit out of me sharing my journey through the different types of data science and data analytics. Spoiler alert, I've kind of done a bit of everything. So I hope I can share some of my experiences to give you some more insight into each of the roles. And I think the final part, we just went over a sample learning path for some of the things that you can learn as a fresh graduate or a beginner going into a machine learning or data science internship or entry-level role. And I also went through a potential learning path for a beginner going through to a data analyst role. So I'll be very sure to link through all of those sections in the description for this YouTube video. So please check it out. If you've missed this live and you need to just skip directly to where you need to go, it's all good. But yeah, thank you again so much for spending your time with me today. It was an honor to help all of you and to just talk through some of the content that I've got, and I had a really good time. But yeah, hope you guys have a really great rest of the Sunday, and hope you have a great week ahead, and I will see you next week. Thank you so much.